This podcast is brought to you by Raising Mama, a bamboo baby brand dedicated to empowering moms during postpartum and raising awareness about maternal mental health. Raising Mama's buttery soft bamboo pajamas aren't just designed to help babies sleep better, they're made to support mothers too. And for every pair sold, a portion of the proceeds is donated to Postpartum Support International. As a thank you for listening, enjoy 20% off your next order with code RaisingMamaVillage at checkout, because we're all in this together. Coming up.
You don't have to only feel one emotion, and newsflash, we are allowed to feel more than one emotion. That is a very human experience. The millennial generation, we're normalizing so many things. And at the same time, we're still getting caught up to speed with not being critical of ourselves. I think that's still so deeply ingrained in so many of us that we're not allowed to feel multiple things at the same time, but you absolutely are.
Hey, y'all.
Hey, mamas.
Welcome back to Raising Mama.
I'm Megan.
And I'm Chelsea.
I'm a divorced mama of 2 toddlers, sharing custody while running my own business.
And I'm a full-time nurse, pregnant with my second baby, and married to a stay-at-home dad.
Join us while we talk about the most pressing issues related to postpartum and new parenthood. Before we dive in, hit the subscribe button for more expert insights and honest conversations on Raising Mama podcast. What does it really mean to be a millennial mom? Raised on girl power and independence, many of us entered motherhood believing we had to do it all and do it perfectly. But reality has shown us that motherhood is anything but black and white. We're the first generation of moms to parent in public under the microscope of social media. We were taught we could have it all, but weren't given the systems of support to make that possible. We were raised to be self-sufficient, only to find that motherhood demands deep interdependence. And we're more emotionally aware than any generation before us, but sometimes that awareness turns into overthinking, comparison, and burnout. Today, we're joined by licensed professional counselor Allie McQuaid, also known as Millennial Mom Therapist on Instagram, who is certified in perinatal mental health and passionate about helping moms release perfectionism and embrace the messy both/and of parenting. With lived experience navigating motherhood as a millennial herself, like so many of us, Allie brings deep empathy and practical insight to the conversation. We're diving into what it means to be a modern mom in a culture that expects it all, why embracing emotional and logistical duality can help us feel more grounded, and how to give ourselves permission to hold conflicting truths at once. That's a lot.
Yeah, you nailed it. That's the episode, right? I know.
That's a lot. And I hope we can get through it all. But I think that this topic of being a millennial is going to help us unpack it all, because there's so much there to process. And it's why when I found you on Instagram, I was like, what's this chick all about? And I really love your content. I love therapist content in general. But let's talk about it. So you call yourself the Millennial Mom Therapist, and like I said, that label just instantly clicked for me. So tell us a little bit about what you do and what your mission is, because you are on social, you're putting yourself out there, you've got 10,000 followers, and why you kind of labeled yourself as a millennial mom therapist and what that means to you personally.
Yeah. I feel like now that you're asking me this question, I'm I need to reflect on this a little bit more, because I went through kind of my own identity shift on social media back around 2020, 2021-ish. So I had my first baby in 2020, the height of the pandemic. Not ideal circumstances. And that's what led to, a lot of my postpartum anxiety. I was obviously under a lot of stress just from the weight of the world changing, and so much was going on, so much uncertainty. And prior to that, I was actually Kid Therapist Life. That was my handle back when I first started posting on social media, because I focused on a lot of child therapy content. And I found myself shifting not only in the content that I wanted to post about, because I was living the motherhood transition, the motherhood, challenges, but I also was kind of being cracked open in a way where I'm oh, so much of my own childhood is coming up throughout my own parenting experience, not only with identity change, but just feeling I'm giving my child this sense of like being able to express her emotions. And of course, at that point, she was still so young, but I felt like this whole like new becoming of myself that I'm like, I want to talk more about this. And I want to talk about what millennials have lived through in terms of not only just major historical events that I think have contributed to our level of stress, but also just the more subtle things, like you said, where it's like we were told we could be it all, and we can do it all, and go to college and do whatever you want to do. You, like the world is your oyster. And then I think, I mean, I don't know about you, but I graduated college in 2009, not ideal circumstances. So I think a lot of us been faced with a lot of events and moments in our life where we've had to kind of feel like, all right, I need to navigate this challenge here and also know that it's okay that I'm feeling really upset about this or really conflicted or really doubtful of myself. So that's where that kind of led to Millennial Mom Therapist, because I'm like, I'm going through my own identity shift here and I'm seeing more clients in my therapy practice that are moms. So I just kind of had a whole like identity shift, not only in my personal life, but in my Instagram life, you know?
Yeah. What, like, from your memory of being a kid, because I'm like maybe a couple years behind you. I graduated college in 2011.
Okay.
And then I also had a pandemic baby. She was born in 2021. So
Mhm.
not quite like,
No, but that was a wave of, struggles. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. But like thinking back on your childhood and being like a millennial kid, which is just so funny now because now this like Y2K trend and like seeing it in the younger generation, it's
Like
all coming
cycles coming through again. Yeah.
not to quote a millennial song, but like it's all coming back to me now, you know.
Yes. Yes.
But like what is like most salient to you? Like what do you remember the most about that era like influencing you or at least maybe in your parenting or in your motherhood?
Yeah. I think for me, I remember feelings not being discussed very much, which I think, is pretty common across like a lot of millennial experiences. I think there's a range. Like either it was that feelings just weren't normalized, weren't talked about enough, and then the more harsher range of like you were forced to shut down your emotions, or there was, trauma or abuse connected to that. I feel very fortunate that I have positive memories in my childhood. I have a lot of like positive nostalgia, that I connect to my millennial experience. And I think that's why I wanted to highlight, some of the things that we live through that we can also even tie in to our own motherhood experience. Because that's another thing that I'm sure we'll get into. A lot of like what's helped me cope through my own motherhood is connecting things that helped me get through my adolescence or get through like tough times. My parents got divorced when I was in high school. So, dealing with transitions or challenges that I had in my childhood, I've actually found a lot of those methods or kind of self-care or just ways of coping are what I'm using now in motherhood. So, music or, movement or connecting with friends or, that sort of thing. So I think there's a lot of parallels there. And there actually is a term for it. There's a term called matrescence. So there's adolescence you have, when you're a kid and all the hormonal and social, physical changes. And the same thing happens in motherhood, but it's when you're obviously having a baby and entering into a new identity stage. So matrescence. So yeah, there's a lot of parallels there. And I think that that's something that really was highlighted was, oh, I need to find ways of coping through this. This is a tough time because I don't know what I'm doing. Like I didn't know what I was doing with my daughter. I felt like I was constantly seeking out external validation and external resources. And that really harped back to my childhood where, I was a good student and I was focused on high achieving and, I wanted to get that trophy or that good grade or have that, like that positive reinforcement from a coach or a teacher or a parent was like, oh, you're doing a good job. You're doing great. You're such a good girl. That certainly following the rules. So in parenthood, there are no like hard set rules. There's no manual. There's no book. So that I think was tricky for me because I'm like, someone just tell me what to do. Someone tell me I'm good, and that doesn't happen. Right.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that you're noticing parallels when you went through matrescence or I don't even know why I'm saying that past tense, because I feel like my oldest is 5 and I'm still in matrescence
Yes.
right now. I don't know if it ever fully stops until they maybe like move out of the house, and then you're like,
not even then. You're going through a whole new chapter then, right? When they move out. So I think it's always, but I get your point. Like when I was really going through it. Yeah.
So you're drawing, parallels between matrescence and adolescence. And I think it's interesting too how it adds this like extra layer to, that's your experience as a millennial, because it's bringing back, memories of being a younger millennial, but now processing it through like a new struggle, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, like a new life stage, a new life transition. And yeah, it's interesting that a lot of it on the inside, I still feel like a kid in some ways, that I want to like hark back to some of those memories or experiences that were positive in my childhood and weave that into my own child's experience. So I know a lot of people are talking about like, let's bring back 90s style living and parenting, because I think the pendulum swung very far where kids were, focused a lot on technology and all of that. And I think there's obviously a lot of nuance to that conversation, because I think we can't go back obviously to the 90s, and there's a lot of good that we have in our generation right now. But yeah, trying to weave in some of that simplicity or some of that nostalgia that we felt growing up, in the 90s or the 2000s, and wanting, our kids to feel some of that sense,
Yeah. I'm glad that you brought up a lot of the nostalgia, because I guess being a podcast so focused on postpartum and women's issues and women's health, and, whether we try to or not, we take quite a feminist slant, or at least like a fourth wave feminist slant. So, but there was a lot of good. I agree. And I did like having that kind of, technology free, no real internet yet, or at least it wasn't widely used the way it is now, pre-smartphones. But at the same time, it had its, I think at the time, like I thought it was all great. And then now looking back, I'm like, wow, yeah, we really didn't talk about our feelings at all. And that's like a female experience. I mean, I feel like the male experience is even worse.
Yeah.
In terms of, self-awareness about what's going on, and sort of emotional intelligence about yourself and things like that. So, anyways, but you shared a reel recently, and it was like a clip from Home Improvement. At least I think it was, because it was Tim Allen. And it was like the best depiction of the mental load of motherhood. And like I'm bringing this up for a few different reasons, but I'm gonna play the clip for us right now. So let's just quickly listen to that.
I will meet with Mark's teacher at 3:00 and find out what's going on. Since I'll be near the house, I'll pick up Brad and Randy. Drop Randy off at the football practice at 3:45, Brad off at the saxophone lesson at 4:15 on the way to my 4:30 class. You take Mark to the doctor at 4:00. Oh, and make sure that she checks that right ear. I think he's got that waxy buildup thing happening again. You might have to have it irrigated. Now, after you go to the doctor, double back to the football field, pick up Randy, come home, make dinner. He should be ready about 5:00. I'll pick up Brad on my way home. We should get there by 6. Does that sound good?
Yeah. One more time from the top.
I remember watching these shows, and it was, pop culture, I think, played a lot into, how we processed not only like our motherhood now, but like what was happening at the time in our own families. And there's a side of it too, where, of course, this role that the mom plays in the family, taking care of all of these mental tasks and the planning and the, emotional labor, that was, it became very normalized. But I think that, the show itself, like, was maybe also making a commentary on it at the time that maybe, like, kinda went over our heads in a
Mhm.
way. But I don't know, like, I feel like these shows and the way, like, our own parents operated at home, it quietly shaped our idea of what a normal family looked like, and do you think that that conditioning, like, still shows up, in how we try to parent today?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad that we're talking about this clip here because I got a lot of comments from that in terms of people saying, like, I should have listened to Jill when I was a kid, or I should have paid more attention to Jill instead of Jonathan Taylor Thomas, But at the time, yeah, we were just little girls probably watching the show with our parents, and it probably mirrored a lot of what we were seeing play out in our lives that maybe wasn't super visible to us. So a lot of the
Mhm.
mental load is highlighting what's invisible. So, Jill going through that play by play of what needed to happen after school was her mentally going through the tasks and, what Tim needed to do as a dad. And then you see him kind of being there in I guess, a humorous way, saying like, oh, repeat it again or do it again, because she did it so effortlessly. So I think that's another thing that we took on as girls being socialized either through TV shows or movies or, Home Improvement isn't the only example of this. I think,
Mhm.
like to your point, yeah, I have so much nostalgia for Home Improvement because I did watch it with my parents and it was a show that at the time, yeah, I was laughing because the laugh tracks were laughing. Remember the shows with
Mhm.
the laugh tracks? And, that was just when we were supposed to laugh, when, Jill was the nagging wife and then Tim is just kind of the bumbling, funny dad. And, oh, that's a joke. That's funny. So that quickly became our snapshot, almost like our roadmap of what to expect out of our future. And there's another clip. So, I mean, if people want to go to my page and check it out, there's another clip that I highlight about Jill trying to be a career woman after being a stay-at-home mom for several years. She has 3 boys. And I think, again, these are fictional characters, but I think that's so much of also what we're seeing now, 30 years later, where women are entering the workforce. I think during COVID in 2020, we saw a big dip where moms, particular, were the ones who were most affected in terms of their careers to stay home. And then now we're seeing a bigger surge of like dual income, dual working parents. And women are struggling because they're either not getting the jobs or, they're struggling to, have both of those identities exist in motherhood. So yeah, the long-winded answer is yes, I think so much of our media that we consumed was TV shows that kind of almost made light of, yeah, this is just how it is. And this is what you should expect. And it wasn't, it was more like subconscious. Like it wasn't something
Mhm.
that was like, yeah, this is what you're going to have to be dealing with because we didn't have a term for the mental load in 1991,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah. I know, and like another thing that I remember about that show and other shows like it or like from that decade is that, and maybe they're still doing this, but they always portrayed the father figure as like being somewhat dopey,
Yes. Yes.
like just loosely incapable, or like, even his response, he's just like, say that again, and I don't know. Like as funny as it is, because it's probably providing some kind of relief to the adult women watching it, like, because it's relatable,
Mhm.
but to the kids watching it, it's so just normalizing it. And
Mhm.
then I think, it can cause problems because you're maybe not seeing red flags later on
Yeah.
in your own relationships because you're like, oh, whatever, it's normal.
Yeah. Yeah. Because TV shows were a time when, like, to your point about the internet, we were either like reading books, magazines, TV shows, movies. Like, those were our forms of like entertainment, back in the 90s and, even the early 2000s at that point. So that was supposed to be our relief after a day,
Mhm.
or remember like TGIF on the weekends, shows like that. We watched, I know I watched like, what's it called? Family Matters or like Everybody Loves Raymond. Like those,
Yeah.
again, are more shows that demonstrated this. And even to the more modern shows like like Modern Family, for example, you still see some of those dynamics where the husband is, kind of dopey and more there for like the comedic relief. And, then Claire, the wife on Modern Family, is like super type A and like keeping
always stressed out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, what else were we supposed to believe other than this is what we should come to expect and not really make a fuss about it? Because then we're the annoying wife, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard too, because I feel like we're all in this identity limbo. So we're caught between wanting to break, these generational cycles, but then we're still struggling with new pressures that no one prepared us for, like social media, for example.
Yeah.
And it's tough too, because again, I don't want to speak for everyone and I don't like making generalizations, but like from what I've gathered and like our own feedback from our community and just watching content online, I feel like a big brunt of that is still being carried by mothers, and like do you see that show up in your work a lot?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think I don't know if I fully answered a question earlier when you asked about the mission of my page. I think first, the mission of my page is to bring a sense of like solidarity and like relatability that so many moms are going through this. And that's why I want to highlight so many of these common topics or challenges, and especially what's showing up in my therapy sessions with clients. Obviously I'm not sharing what specifically someone's saying, like gotta maintain confidentiality. And like to your point about seeing therapists up on social media, I think, so many of us are having these intimate, vulnerable conversations with the people who are living it in the day to day, that we're able to maybe bring a perspective and highlight so much of it that people are challenged with. So, about social media, I think this is something that the millennial generation and probably even Gen X, but I know they're the forgotten generation. Sorry, Gen X. But, the millennial generation, I think, is one of the first to be parenting with the pressures that social media brings. So, I mean, when you think about the initial wave of like social media, you think about, obviously Facebook, but there was like mommy bloggers and, people who were sharing different sides of motherhood that no one had really talked about before. So I think that's something that I often, if I get feedback from like the boomer generation or like older generations, it's that like, oh, well, we didn't talk about this. We didn't have postpartum depression, or this wasn't a thing, and it's like, no, like I actually have a lot of like compassion and empathy for them that it was a thing, but they felt like they didn't have the space that they could talk about it. So I think that's something that is, I guess, a positive about what social media is bringing to the parenting and motherhood space right now, is that there are so many conversations filled with vulnerability and realness and people just being honest about their motherhood experiences. And I think the flip side of that is there's a lot of still comparison that is going on that is making people feel inadequate and making people doubt themselves and feel highly anxious, and also isolated, which is ironic because we're so connected, but we're also still feeling isolated in motherhood, which is, not a good experience. But
yeah. All right. We're going to pause the show for just a minute because I want to share something personal with you. After having my first baby, I felt completely unprepared for how challenging postpartum life would be. I quickly realized that society just doesn't give moms the support we deserve. That's why I created Raising Mama, to make those early days just a little bit easier. Raising Mama pajamas are made from the softest bamboo fabric, engineered with micro gaps to help babies sleep better and give mamas a much needed boost. The prints feature uplifting messages like, "Mama, I wished for you," and "It's okay to ask for help." Phrases that are meant to prevent those negative thought cycles that so many of us struggle with during postpartum. And because you're a listener of this podcast, I want to give you a special 20% off with the code Raising Mama Village. Plus, every time you buy a pair, we donate $1 to Postpartum Support International to support maternal mental health. Thank you for being a part of this journey with us. Now let's get back to the show. Yeah, it's funny you talk about the isolation because, just with your bio, like talking about like the girl power era, and I was a huge Spice Girls nut.
Love Spice Girls. Yes. No hate to them in the girl power movement. Yes.
Yeah. And like my mom has this quote. She, like how parents always have the stories they bring up of their kids like over and over again. And like now as a mom, I'm like, what will the stories be that I bring up about my kids?
Yeah.
But it really wasn't like a big deal that I said this, but like I was trying to convince her. We lived in the Bay and I was trying to convince her to like just let me play hooky one day and we could go to San Francisco. And like she was a little bit hesitant to go alone. I don't know. I think my mom had like some anxiety about going into the big city like alone with her like 10-year-old daughter. And I told her, Mom, we can do it. Girl power. And she thought it was so cute. And, but looking back, now I'm, I have my own company. I have a postpartum podcast. And I feel like that attitude definitely started back then where I felt like I could do things myself. I didn't need a man, at the time, my dad to come with us to go do something. We could figure it out. And granted, it could just be a personality difference between my mom and I. But I do think that, having that same quote unquote girl power vibe now, it does bring a bit of loneliness with it too. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to like get too deep into it, but it's definitely related to being career driven, and wanting what's best for yourself and wanting what's best for your kids and carving your own path, blocking out the noise and maybe, I don't know, maybe it's hyper independence, but it's not just that. I think it's also just not having certain like aspects of society and culture catch up, that then you're in a place where you're like, wow, if I'm doing all these things that are self-fulfilling, but I'm kind of here alone.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you made a really good point. And I wanted to go back to what you said about like your mom and that whole experience when you were 10. I grew up outside of DC. So same kind of like city feeling. I think that my mom experienced where my dad traveled a lot. So she was parenting solo a lot of the time. I was an only child. So, maybe that was part of the decision, in terms of family planning. But yeah, she had moments like that where now looking back, she did have anxiety but she was able to kind of do it while anxious, do it anyways. And I think that modeled for me that sense of like independence, or that sense of like not needing to rely on someone in order to set goals or do the things that you want to do. I'm very thankful that my parents were supportive of like whatever career path I wanted to go down. Even they didn't know anything about psychology, but they're like, okay, if that's what you want to do, which was great, because I think also coming from a generation where feelings weren't normalized, mental health wasn't a thing, they were kind of like, probably, I'm sure, a little skeptical of like, what is she going to be able to do with this career? And now here I am owning my own business, like providing, therapy for moms and kids, and like having this success, that I would define success. But yeah, at the same time, when you're thinking about like maybe women who either want to go down this path and they're not able to, or maybe they found themselves in this place of, maybe hyper independence, or, leaning too far into I can do it myself, I'm on my own, then they find themselves struggling, and then they're alone and they don't have the supports they need. So, I think obviously there's nuance to all those conversations, but yeah, I think it's important that we're talking about it, and we're talking about how maybe part of our upbringing, or part of what we were socialized to believe about, you can do it all, you can be it all, maybe somehow kind of failed us in a way to not look at things of more of like a community type support, or it's okay to kind of work together on things, or, rely on supports, ask for help, all of those things.
Yeah. And I mean, the trends do go back and forth. Like that's how culture tends to work, right? They go to one extreme, and then, now there's this kind of movement of like going back to your femininity and going back to like traditional mothering. And it's all just like, oh my gosh. And I'm sure it's also all, what's the word, like kind of magnified by social media. Cause like you might think something is like gaining more traction than it actually is. But like, I guess speaking of that, there is such a big duality when it comes to motherhood. In fact, at least in my opinion, I feel like that to me is the biggest emotion, I guess, or or maybe not struggle, but like uh maybe feature of motherhood is the duality, like the both and like you're not only when you're problem solving, because I know you have a post about the both andness of motherhood and that, we don't need to choose one thing over the other and we can, try to find balance and incorporate both. But also like in the feelings that we feel, right? So, you know, ha- the classic example of like loving your baby so much and missing it, so much also when you're gone, or like needing room to breathe or time to be alone. But then when you're alone, you just like want to be with your kids. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, yeah. I think this is something that when you were thinking about like the different like features of motherhood, like this was something that kind of was unexpected for me. So there are so many things I think that happen in motherhood that, we feel blindsided by a little bit, or we feel was not something that we were expecting. So I think so many of maybe my friends who had kids prior to me, or just what I saw again on social media at the time, very still curated in this like highlight reel and everything so magical, and you'll love your kids at all times. And yes, I agree that, and kind of the both. And I found myself, wanting to take a break, or, wanting to have other parts of myself amplified in motherhood, or feeling resentful that why did it seem like my husband was just living life as normal and everything changed for me? So, I think that, like you said, the duality of being able to accept that two feelings can coexist at the same time. So you can feel immense gratitude for, welcoming a baby, and you can feel maybe guilt that you feel like you're not doing enough, or you can feel anger that like, why can't my baby sleep? Like what, that rage. I see that a lot in the moms I've been working with recently, where this rise of maternal rage and how much shame comes with that, where they feel like I'm not supposed to be feeling this way, or this is not how I've ever felt in my life. I've never considered myself an angry person, but now I'm so irritable and agitated and ragey. This isn't me. So yeah, allowing for things don't have to be either or. You don't have to like only feel one emotion. And newsflash, like we are allowed to feel more than one emotion. That is a very human experience. But I think so many of us, because when we think about our foundation of what we grew up with, first feelings weren't even talked about really. So now we're feeling all these feelings. And I think so many of us, which I love about the millennial generation, so many of us are pro therapy. We want to go to therapy. We want to talk to our friends about it. We're very open and expressive, and we're normalizing so many things. And at the same time, we're still getting caught up to speed with like not being critical of ourselves. I think that's still so deeply ingrained in so many of us that we're not allowed to feel multiple things at the same time. But you absolutely are. Yeah.
And I think that like perfectionism also strongly plays into that, because you're and social media, because you're getting all of this information on how to do things, and you really want to be a good mom, and you really want to do things the right way. But then, of course, your perfectionism is like tied back to probably some anxiety that you're feeling. And I read something the other day that was talking about how, in kids, so, I don't know, maybe this ties back into when you were a therapist more focused on kids, but how when you see perfectionism in kids, a lot of that really is just anxiety. Because I'm trying to process my daughter's feelings. She has like some really big feelings. Sometimes she's 5, but and it's all I'm just, I'm trying to figure out like, why is she having such a hard time doing something new? Or like, why is she having such a hard time when she can't figure something out in like the first 10 minutes? Like she wanted to learn how to do a headstand or a handstand. She's already great at a cartwheel, but she wants to learn how to do a handstand, and she couldn't figure it out in like half an hour and was like absolutely so upset with herself. And it's like, of course you're not going to be able to do that in half an hour.
Yeah.
But I think it comes back down to perfectionism. And sorry, not to like be explaining this for too long, but I look at her and I see myself.
Yes.
And there's so many lessons to learn there as we're parenting our children. Because not only are we sometimes, depending on the kids, seeing ourselves just because of genetics, but we're also, reflecting back on our childhood and stuff. So
yeah, there's so much that's mirrored right in front of us where, seeing your daughter, have like some struggle with that new task, that new skill, and hearing you say, and I'm sure this is similar to probably what you said to her, like, it's okay to not know how to do something right away, or it's okay for something to take some time to learn how to do. And what's so fascinating about that is that we don't give ourselves that same compassion when we're a new mom. Everything is new. Every single thing like you've never done before as a mom when you're a new parent. And even when, if you have multiple kids, at every kid, it's still a new experience because you're welcoming in a new kid that has new temperament. It's a new family dynamic. Everything is different and new. So everything is going to take some time to learn. And with that sense of like perfectionism or that anxiety, it sounds more like a worry of like, what if I can't handle it if it doesn't go the way that I hope it does? So I think the worst thing that we can do with any sense of anxiety or sense of something new is pretending like it's not going to show up. It's going to show up because it's new, it's scary, it's unfamiliar. So to your point and kind of what you were explaining about your daughter, when I was working with children, and I mean, I still do, but a lot of my caseload is moms now, but I do this with moms as well, where we talk about the anxiety, we pull it out from our brains and not make it this like scary taboo thing. We make it this thing that we're going to anticipate, because when we're stepping into something new, that anxiety is going to show up and it's going to make us feel like you can't handle this. So either avoid it, don't do it, because unless we're going to do it perfectly the first time, we're going to avoid it, right? Or if you're trying to do it and you're getting frustrated with yourself because I can't figure this out, I can't figure out whatever it is, like feeding my baby, or I can't figure out how to get them to sleep, like I can't figure out how to stop the tantrums. Like we're so critical that we can't get it right, that maybe it's like, no, we just need to be okay with the fact that we're still learning, we're growing. Like motherhood is such a fluid experience that you're going to make mistakes. And I think if you're going into it thinking that you're not, then you're going to be in for a wake up call. And then that's what happened to me. That's what happens for a lot of the moms that seek out therapy, is that they're struggling with, feeling like they're not doing good enough.
Yeah. It's heartbreaking actually, because I feel like we're so incredibly hard on ourselves, and the same graces that we give other adults and children in our lives, we rarely or infrequently extend to ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to hear it from someone else, whether it be a therapist or whoever. But I think that, we also don't need to have permission to not feel guilty about something or not feel shame, even though it helps. I think for me, at least, that was like a big barrier that I had to get over, is like, I don't need permission. I can just I can just forgive myself. I can just go do what I want to do. I don't need anyone's permission or approval.
No.
But yeah, so.
Yeah, no, I love that you said that in terms of like just giving yourself permission just to be and just to continue going about life. And I think that's a big thing that I talk about with moms who experience guilt is that like, where is that guilt voice coming from? A lot of it is from our societal upbringings of feeling like, yeah, you should always be present with your kid, or you should like only go to work and only be with your kids and be playing with them and don't yell at them. And, all these pressures to like be perfect and be doing it right, quote unquote, right, But yeah, once you allow yourself that permission to either acknowledge where the guilt is coming from, or just knowing that, all right, guilt is basically just kind of like a byproduct of the anxiety, just doing it anyways, just doing it with the feeling. And the more you do it, then the less that feeling is consuming you.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I like that. Is there, just like as a whole, is there like a mantra or reminder that helps you keep your footing on days where everything feels like it's too much?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I
like asking people this because we all have our ways of picking ourselves up, I guess.
Yeah.
And but I don't know. I'm interested that with your background and your lens on things, if there's something that has really worked for you personally.
Yeah. No, that's a really good question. And I feel like I haven't reflected now that I'm reflecting back on it. I'm like, I noticed that I find myself saying to myself either like, it's okay, or you're growing, you're figuring this out, you're learning, like a lot of like very like growth oriented mindset, which I admit I did not have very early in motherhood, but now almost 5 years in, I'm able to pause and also notice that I don't have to always have like a response right away. So for example, if my daughter like one morning, she wants to eat her Easter candy. And I'm at the point where I'm like, no, like we're not going to have. So that's been something where I'm reminding myself, like, it's okay to hold boundaries. You're not being mean. I think that was a big thing that I had to like overcome. You're not being mean, because that was something as a child, like growing up in my teen years and even like in college, I didn't want to be like a mean girl. Of course, who wants to be? But knowing that you're a parent and that is my role, and it is okay to be a parent, and it is okay to set boundaries. No one taught me how to do this, but I'm figuring it out. So a lot of like, I'm figuring out, I'm growing, like that seems to be kind of, I guess, like a mantra that I'm telling myself. And also a lot more pausing before reacting or responding. So not having to always, say something right away or comfort or fix the situation, like just kind of letting things be for a moment and then allowing myself space to either like take a breath or think about like, okay, what do I need to do next? Way earlier in motherhood, I would be like the fixer or the like, she's crying, I need to like get her right away, that sort of thing. So yeah, just kind of slowing down, really. Yeah.
I love that. I think that's such great advice, because we are so programmed these days to respond to everything right away. Even a text message these days, you're just like, and then if you don't reply, you're like, oh, I'm so sorry, I was busy. And it's like, well, of course you were,
Yeah. But back to like thinking about our upbringing, we were unavailable. Like we didn't have, even when we had text messaging, there wasn't this expectation that you had to respond right away,
Yeah.
So I think so much of our, really formative years where we learned about ourselves and our brain was developing in life, we were like detached from having to be like connected to someone at all times. Like we were free. So when I think about slowing down, I think that also like probably harps back to a little bit of nostalgia where it's like, yeah, I can like wait a second. I don't have to always be available or always be super responsive. I'm doing a good enough job. So reminding myself of that too, I think is important.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it was so nice talking to you. If you as a listener found this helpful, make sure to share it with a friend, and be sure to follow Allie on Instagram at Millennial Mom Therapist. I really love your content. I think it's like very, very thoughtful and very helpful. So be sure to check her out. And one last thing, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. It's the best way to support our small podcast and help us reach more moms who need this information. Thank you, Allie, so much for being on the show. We appreciate you so much. And we'll see everyone else next time on Raising Mama Podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on future conversations. And follow us on Instagram at Raising Mama Podcast for more updates, resources, and a peek behind the scenes. See you next time.